Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday, December 20th. We are closing in on Christmas, which means a smorgasbord of games the next 10 or 12 days, both college and NFL. We have one of the college football playoff games that might be going right now, where it's kicking off pretty quick. And then tomorrow, 3 more college games plus 2 NFL games, full slate on Sunday. Monday, 2 more games on Wednesday. A lot of football coming up in the next few days.
It's like presents. We just opening presents every day. Got a new present coming.
And silly me, I thought the NFL was only doing one Saturday. I was like, oh, I guess they're not doing 2 Saturdays this year. They just hadn't decided which games they were going to flex to Saturday or the following week. So Denver is one of those teams that got flexed onto Saturday. They'll have some time to think and reflect because they got flexed into Thursday last night. Came in with a golden chance to lock up a playoff spot with a victory over the Chargers. It was looking good for a while. They scored touchdowns on their first 3 drives. Not a good second half as the Chargers came back and got the 34-27 victory. Both teams now 9-6, still both in range for the playoffs. Dennis, no Jaleel McLaughlin. He was out with an injury. We got more of a look at Audric Estime, 9 carries, 48 yards, and a touchdown. It certainly seems like they're moving toward letting Javonte Williams go. Do you like Estime for the future, or are you worried that we're just going to replace Javonte Williams with Blake Watson in a 3-headed monster once again in 2025?
Well, Watson only played 10 snaps last night, so it feels like –
and he touched the ball 5 times.
Yeah. So Javonte played 33 snaps and Estime played 13 snaps. How that would have broke down with McLaughlin, would it have impacted Williams more? I don't know. Williams looked good early, and so I think Sean Payton is kind of leaning into that. Whoever gets the ball and looks the best the soonest is going to get the ball a little bit more. Williams caught 7 passes for a meager 29 yards.
Would have had a beautiful walk-in touchdown if Bo Nix had any touch on his passes.
Yeah, that he kind of rifled that one, didn't he?
Not kind of. It was high and tight.
Yeah. So Estime is, he's a big back. He's not terribly fast. He's a grinder. What is he, about 225 pounds, ran a 4.7 40. Didn't look great. It's not super agile, but he's a certain type of back that if Peyton believes in his scheme, we've seen it in New Orleans, sometimes that big back, they're going to block it up and he's going to get what he gets. And it ends up being a guy that, gets 12, 14 carries and 60 yards, 65 yards, and you end up rostering him as your RB 3 or 4 or 5 and hoping he gets into the end zone on the weeks that you have to start him. I agree with you. I think they're preparing to let Williams walk. They don't want to bring him back. If I'm Williams, I got to be honest, I don't know that I want to come back. But the grass isn't always greener. I do like Javonte Williams' talent. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be some kind of a committee, though. I like Estime. He's a Holden dynasty, but yeah, I don't think Sean Payton is
If they like
a one player
Watson,
anything. The Broncos, if you watched all season, every offensive skill position player that's active not only comes in but seems to get a touch. They rotate around several tight ends. They use all 5 of their wide receivers. They use all 3 backs. If you're active, you're going to touch the ball, and that's just
bad
the
for
way it
fantasy.
is. Yeah,
Unless
it's not
you're
great
doing
for
it.
fantasy. Sometimes it's good for on the field, but it's not going to be good for fantasy. I think it's going to be harder to pin down pass catchers outside of maybe one. I remain like right now, Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton. I'm definitely starting. If I want some upside, I'll go with Vele because you saw why yesterday. They like him. He's a bigger receiver. Sometimes he gets a touchdown, but he only had 3 targets, managed to turn one over. You just never know. Is it Franklin going to get a big play? Marvin Mims took a 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage for 55 yards down the field. That's not because they bombed the ball to him. That's because he escaped and the defender took a horrendous line. So
Right.
it's really hard, especially for fantasy playoffs at this point in time, to trust anyone. And even with guys that you're fairly confident about, like Cortland Sutton, I mean, he got the second most targets on the team, but only 5 for 50 was okay, but not incredible.
Yeah. I think going back to Blake Watson, he if they like him, I feel like they'll add either another rookie or they're going to add a low-level veteran just to have that 4th back, but they'll continue with McLaughlin and Estime going forward and see how they can work somebody else up, develop somebody else.
I'm curious if they end up finding. So the last couple of off seasons, I know Peyton has kicked the tires with bigger free agent running backs. They looked real hard at whether they could afford Josh Jacobs, and there was somebody else. But with their cap situation the way it was, that cap is coming free. I do wonder, the thing I would worry about any of the lower end, none of them has particular draft capital. Jaleel McLaughlin was an undrafted free agent, so is Blake Watson. Audric Estime, I think, was 4th or 5th round pick. I don't know that anyone necessarily would command a lot of touches if Peyton gets, what if Peyton finds a way to get like Alvin Kamara? I think that changes a little bit what they do. I think that's why they made a run at Josh Jacobs. I'll be curious to see if anyone comes free this offseason, what they choose to do, because now they have a quarterback they like. They have some receivers they like. I still think they're going to target something or figure out what they're going to do with Sutton, but I would not be surprised if this offseason he targets some kind of what he would consider a sizable running back upgrade, because they have harped all season long on not being able to run effectively, which I watched the games. That's certainly true. Speaking of running effectively, since J.K. Dobbins went out, it has been a real slog for the Chargers. Last night, maybe some signs of life. Gus Edwards, 14 carries, 68 yards, gets 2 touchdowns. Did have one big 43-yard run, but does that encourage you at all as we're in this playoff stretch?
So it doesn't. It all it did was confirm our priors as it relates to Gus Edwards. Gus is a run first, run pretty much only back. He's always going to be a committee back. He's having the least efficient season of his career, but this is what we've seen in the past. He missed 4 games, which is other than he missed one entire year. He usually plays most of the games, but this season he missed 4. Only 3 games over 6 fantasy points in PPR leagues, and only 1 double-digit game, and that was yesterday. So how do we feel? I think he is who he is. He's an RB 3, 4, 5. Last season, he was RB 23 based on scoring 13 touchdowns. Previously, or he was RB 25, excuse me, based on scoring 13 touchdowns. Prior to that, he was RB 66, RB 37, RB 52, RB 55. That's just who he is. You're going to get games like this. Do I wish I had started him yesterday because I have Isaac Guerendo in a slot in a starting league? I just waited a little too long to buy into the Guerendo's likely not playing. He's still listed as questionable in that league, and I was like, dang, there I go, leaving 20 points on my bench with Gus Edwards in a standard league of all things.
I don't know that I would have expected him to score the touchdowns, though. If you would have said that he was going to get 68 yards, I would have been happy about that. The two, 68 and a touchdown would have been fantastic. The 2 touchdowns was kind of icing on the cake.
I agree 100%. I think on 14 carries and
hard to second guess yourself too hard with that.
Well, but if I didn't think Guerendo was playing, I would have played Edwards, and was just waiting and didn't put him in.
Well, let's move to the rest of the games that are taking place, and that starts with the Saturday games. First up, the Houston Texans 9-5 at the Kansas City Chiefs 13-1. Dennis, Joe Mixon started the season on fire. The last 5 games, he's kind of alternated between rough and back to what we were expecting. When he missed a game with injury, then he came back for Houston on November 10th. Had only 46 yards on 25 carries, got a touchdown that helped. But then the following week, 109 yards and 3 touchdowns. Okay, great. Then November 24th, only 22 yards on 14 carries. But the following week, 101 yards and a touchdown. Then last week, 12 carries, 23 yards against Miami. Are we believing in the cycle? Is he in for a big game here against Kansas City?
I don't know if he's in for a big game. Kansas City's got a pretty good defense. Mixon is sitting at RB2 on a points per game basis. He missed 4 games in the middle of the season there. He has the second highest yards per game of his career. So has been effective, but he started to fade a little bit. He has the highest touchdown percentage of his career. Those things all would say fire him up. Part of what always made Mixon so, enticing was that he's a good receiver. He's good in pass protection. He's good at catching the ball. So you don't have to take him out. He's a volume back. You can give him – he's got the size to handle 25 touches. But this year, his receiving yards overall are down, but his yards per game are up a little bit. So he's not catching as many passes. Missing games hurt him. I like Mixon. They don't have anybody that's a threat to his volume, really. So I'm firing Mixon up. I think he's probably going to be a top 15 running back because of volume, if nothing else.
Next up, we know Patrick Mahomes is going to try to gut it out with that ankle injury at tight end. We've seen Travis Kelce do pretty well, but we've also seen Noah Gray emerging more lately. How are you handling those two at tight end?
Yeah, so Mahomes is off the injury report. They're feeding – I can't tell if I feel like they're feeding us a line of bull with him off the injury report or what.
Yes, the answer to your question is yes.
I mean – it's not like it's Andy Reid. He's not Shanahan. It feels like Andy Reid straight up.
Oh, no. I mean, I think they're just telling you he's going to play unequivocally. Whether that ends up being a good decision for them or not, we shall see.
So it's been a tale of 2 tight ends for the Chiefs. I'm not sure if I buy into we're seeing a changing of the guard, mostly because I'm not sure if I buy that Noah Gray is the new guard. But Gray is having a pretty good year. Kelce was tight end 3 through week 10, but he's been tight end 13 since week 11. Noah Gray was tight end 37 through week 10, but he's been tight end 5 over that same stretch since week 11. So they've kind of flopped not quite to the same extreme that they were in the first 10 games, but Gray has been productive. Now, what I will say is only one game of the last 5 games has Gray been within about 20% of the snaps of Kelce. So Kelce is still playing significantly more snaps. And that was in week 11 when Gray was close to Kelce in snaps. I think Travis Kelce feels like, I don't know how much you play the stock market at all, but Travis Kelce's starting to feel like the bonds of the stock market for the Chiefs there. And Noah Gray feels like the hot penny stock right now. He's taken off and, going into high growth. Is it going to be enough to carry him into next year in a more prominent role next year? I know they drafted Noah Wiley, not Noah Wiley. Is it Jared Wiley, a backup?
I think it's Jared Wiley. Yeah. No, Noah Wiley's our TV doctor.
That's right. And Jared Wiley, who athletically comps very well to Travis Kelce. And there was a lot of dynasty talk in the offseason that he was like being slotted in to be the heir to Travis Kelce. But Noah Gray is playing very, very good. I'm still, if I'm starting Noah Gray in the second round of the playoffs, it's because I'm throwing a Hail Mary.
I am going to take the Texans in this one.
I'm going to stick with that Pat Mahomes magic. I'm going Chiefs.
Next up, the 10-4 Pittsburgh Steelers at the 9-5 Baltimore Ravens. Dennis, no George Pickens again for the third straight game. How do you feel about Russell Wilson for fantasy?
So he's QB 18 since he took over in week 7, which in and of itself doesn't sound too bad. It's like always a QB2, mid QB2. It's pretty good for super flex. But man, with George Pickens out, that just ain't it. There's no receivers. I mean, they could go pick up Deontay Johnson, who just got cut. That might be helpful, and he kind of knows the offense. Maybe, I don't know.
He might be in Baltimore.
Yeah. So it's they really rely on George Pickens to be a difference maker in that passing offense. And nobody else has been able to step up and take that role in Pickens' absence. Calvin Austin will make a play here or there. Van Jefferson will make a play here or there. It just doesn't feel like they have, it's good for Pat Freiermuth. So if you've started Pat Freiermuth, maybe that's been good for your fantasy playoffs. But because they can't throw the ball, it also has affected their running game with Najee Harris, who had been kind of beasting out lately and really providing us with a lot of production in the fantasy world. But that seems to be everything seems to be just off kilter right now. I'm a little bit nervous about that for fantasy because I've got Warren and Harris in a couple different spots, and I really could stand for both of them to be productive. I don't feel great about it on the Ravens against the Reds.
The Mike Williams acquisition has them in a lot. And one thing that I think is interesting is Pittsburgh had been
so good. I didn't even remember he was there.
Pittsburgh had been so remarkable with finding wide receivers in the draft, but they seem to have really missed on Roman Wilson, who can't stay healthy, can't get on the field, and couldn't make a difference when he was there. I think they're going to have to really do something this offseason. You mentioned Deontay Johnson, mild surprise based on what we were hearing earlier in the week, but the Ravens did decide to outright release him. He will not be free to clear waivers to sign with the team until Monday, apparently. So probably not a reunion for this weekend's set of games. But Johnson released. What do you think happens with him now?
He's a talented player. I think he got disillusioned in Carolina because they were bad. They were really bad. And he just was, he's like, it's the old meme, I got dressed up for this. And he really struggled with that. And then when he went to Baltimore, I think he felt like he was going to be able to step in and be one of their top receivers. And John Harbaugh basically said, look, we've got guys, you got to earn your spot. And he felt like his history had, earned him a shot at the title, and he wasn't getting it over Bateman and over even over Aguilar, definitely not over Zay Flowers. And yet, to top it all off, the Ravens don't pass the ball a ton. So is there going to be someplace, the Raiders, they could use him. The Giants could use him. There's going to be somebody's going to sign him and bring him in, and hopefully he's been humbled by this year, and he goes, all right, let me put my big boy pants on, go look in the mirror, and I'm going to go out and go back to work and become a productive wide receiver in the NFL again.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't catch on. Some people are saying he's going to catch with a contender for the stretch run. I'm not 100% on that.
I feel like he's going to need to catch on with somebody that's just outside being a contender.
He might be a guy that doesn't catch on with somebody until next season, because I don't know that he's going to want to settle for, like, you're not wrong. Maybe the Giants could use help. I don't know if I would go there right now. So.
Right. That quarter. You thought Bryce Young was bad. Holy crap.
I am taking the Ravens.
So am I.
On to the Sunday slate. And speaking of those Giants, the 2-12 Giants at the 7-7 Atlanta Falcons. Dennis, Wan'Dale Robinson was having a pretty good season with Daniel Jones, but with this revolving door of Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock, and Tim Boyle, he has kind of disappeared for fantasy. How are you feeling about him?
I'm definitely not starting him in the playoffs. If he goes off and catches 7 passes for 65 yards and a touchdown on my bench somewhere, so be it. I cannot take that risk. The quarterback play there has been so bad. And whoever is in, though, is force-feeding the ball to Malik Neighbors, as they rightfully should. Wan'Dale has just one double-digit game, PPR game, since week 6. He's a low floor flex. He's a guy that you're looking at. If you want to get 7 points, Wan'Dale's your guy. Maybe 5. It's 2 or 3 or 4 receptions for probably less than 10 yards. If he had a productive quarterback, I think he could be, one of these PPR monster guys we see. He could be the second fiddle to Malik Neighbors and get 6 targets a game and catch 5 of them and be productive with that. But not with this quarterbacking crew.
Yeah, and on Roulette, it looks like they said they're trending toward Drew Lock starting this week. We'll see who finishes. For Atlanta, right after our discussion on Tuesday night, they announced that they are benching Kirk Cousins for the rest of the season. Michael Penix Jr. getting the start on Sunday and presumably the rest of the
6 points from Darnell Mooney, and I would have advanced.
What are you expecting from Michael Penix, aside from maybe the 6 points from Darnell Mooney?
Yeah, 1 week too late. Penix had kind of a star-crossed college career. 4 years at Indiana, and I think virtually every season ended in a season-ending injury. He didn't play more than 6 games at Indiana, but he started a lot of games while he was there. Then he goes to Washington, lights it up. He's got great receivers. He threw almost 1,700 passes in college and had a 96-34 interception ratio. At Washington, he was 75 for 1,109. He had over 1,100 pass attempts in 2 seasons at Washington. Threw for over 9,500 yards, 67 touchdowns, 19 interceptions with a 65.4 completion percentage. He seems to have all of the tools. And one of the things that I've started to look more and more in my quarterback evaluations are how many games has this guy played? I'm starting to shy away more from these 1-year wonders, even these 2-year guys. But Penix, he started close to 45 games, somewhere around there in college. So, well, he's not Bo Nix. He's not Dylan Gabriel or Brock Purdy, these guys that have started, 118 games in college. He's got a pretty significant resume when it comes to college football. I think he's going to be good. He's got a great deep ball. Even with his history of injuries to both knees, he's a fairly mobile quarterback. He's more a mobile in the pocket quarterback than Lamar Jackson going to run around. He's kind of mobile, more like C.J. Stroud. But I think Penix has the ability to, if you view Drake London as his Rome Odunze, Darnell Mooney as his Jalen Polk, I don't know, Ray McLeod then would be his Jalen McMillan. It seems like he's set up to have a good first game. I don't think the game is going to be too big for him. I'm looking for positive stuff from him. And top it all off, he's got Bijan Robinson.
I am taking the Falcons.
So am I.
Probably the best news for him is he's playing the Giants.
I know, right? I mean, isn't Cousins is like, what do you mean you're sitting me versus the Giants?
I mean, it does make sense if they want to make a change. This is probably the softest of their remaining games. The Detroit Lions 12-2 at the Chicago Bears. No David Montgomery, though. Good news, he may be able to make a playoff run, which is good news if you're shilling for the Lions, not really for fantasy. But what are you expecting from Jahmyr Gibbs?
I expect Jahmyr Gibbs to be better than he has been because he gets more volume. So he's currently RB4 and RB4 in points per game. Phenomenal pass catcher out of the backfield, dynamic runner. He may have to be all of that because they are playing outside in Chicago, and we all know the history of Jared Goff playing outdoors and especially playing outdoors in the bad weather. It feels like it's going to be a good Laporta game because of the short passing. The Bears are struggling. Their defense has fallen apart since Eberflus left. Thomas Brown, well, he may have had a little flash in the pan at the beginning of this interim tenure. I don't think he gets interviewed for the position. It's gone so bad. He should have just stayed at the OC.
So I'm guessing you're not expecting a lot from Caleb either. It seems like Williams has been worse the last two games since they let go of Eberflus than in that run right before.
Yeah, I'm not bullish on Caleb, but I'm not dumping him either. I think he's a hold in Dynasty, unless somebody blows your doors off. Like if you get for me, if I'm going to trade Caleb Williams, I'm going to try to get a pick that puts me in position to draft Shedeur Sanders. I was looking at Sanders' numbers yesterday because it's easy to think, he's a function of Deion Sanders, marketing, whatnot. I closed out my sheet, but Shedeur Sanders has actually had quite a prolific college career. He doesn't run the ball much at all. I think he's got
pray for the team that drafts him.
I think
I live here.
Worse than Archie Manning was.
You can't sell me on that. Sorry.
But I mean, he's completed almost 70% of his passes across two different colleges. He's got a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Will there be growing pain? Sure. But I think if I had a shot to get him and I had to move Caleb Williams to do it, I would do it.
I am taking the Lions.
This is the perfect game for the Lions because, as I said the other day, their defense isn't good. Their offense needs to play against teams they can outscore, and the Bears are one of those. I'm going Lions too.
Next up, a couple of bad games on the schedule, but the Cleveland Browns 3-11 at the 6-8 Cincinnati Bengals. The Browns have decided to sit Jameis Winston, going to Dorian Thompson-Robinson. You expecting anything? I know I did not even have him in top 24. He is a low-end QB3 for me.
Yeah. I think the best thing Dorian Thompson-Robinson has going for him this weekend is that the Bengals defense isn't good.
Well, and it looks like Tillman and Njoku are tracking to return, so I actually think that is a bummer for both them, and if you were riding Jerry Jeudy.
Well, and we saw last week Jerome Ford popped off a long one, but they're activating my guy Deontay Foreman. So I could see them in the backfield splitting it between Foreman in the passing game with some carries, Ford in the passing game with some carries, and Foreman grinding it out with 2.5 yards a carry for 15 carries.
Meanwhile, for the Bengals, they actually have their playoff hopes are rekindled.
Hanging by a thread.
I know. So I'm assuming you're expecting a huge game from T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, despite playing a decent defense.
Cleveland's defense has been a little bit off lately, but I think when Joe Burrow's back there, you always expect a pretty good game. Higgins is wide receiver 34, but he's wide receiver 10 in points per game. He's having a phenomenal year for having missed 5 games. Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 1. Chase Brown has went off, and Mike Gesicki just makes timely plays. Not enough volume that you would want to start him. If you start Gesicki, you might as well. Who I think I mentioned earlier, tight end that you throw in there because you're just hoping something happens.
Yeah.
I like the Bengals' offensive weapons. They have a pretty narrow funnel with Brown, Chase, and Higgins. And so you can roll all 3 of those guys out there. I think that Cincinnati kind of rolls. I don't think the defense is going to quit, but I do think there's going to be a lot more than they can handle.
I am taking the Bengals.
Me too.
Next up, the 3-11 Tennessee Titans at the 6-8 Indianapolis Colts, another team whose playoff hopes are hanging by a thread. The Titans have decided they've seen enough of Will Levis going to Mason Rudolph. Will that make much of a difference?
Man, no. I mean, maybe. So with Levis, you're looking at 175 yards and probably a couple interceptions. And with Rudolph, you're probably looking at 175 yards with a lot less of a chance of a couple interceptions. Levis threw for only 95 yards versus the Colts earlier in the year. Hopkins was still with the team then. Mason Rudolph has been a QB2 for the 5 games that he has started this year, and he's been a high-end QB2 in 3 of them. I think going against the Colts, Zaire Franklin and that team, they're going to give him some issues, but I think I'm okay rolling the dice on Mason Rudolph as a low-end QB2 in a super flex league.
For the Colts, we like Josh Downs and Michael Pittman Jr., but this passing game has been incredibly erratic. Very important semifinal week in fantasy. Are you trusting either of them?
Nope.
Yep.
Downs is wide receiver 23 since week 4, but wide receiver 92 since week 12, but he did miss a game. Pittman is wide receiver 46, wide receiver 47. Alec Pierce is wide receiver 46, and he's outscored Pittman, albeit in more games, but it's just you can't trust any of them. You can barely trust Jonathan Taylor on this.
And I trust that he's not going to fumble the ball at the goal line if given a chance this week.
Now, to be fair, he didn't fumble. He dropped it on purpose.
Alec Pierce is out, so
okay.
But they'll probably just slot in Adonai Mitchell.
Yeah.
So I am still taking the Colts in this one.
Me too, just based on the defense.
Next up, the Los Angeles Rams, 8-6, who are very much in the playoff race, at the 4-10 New York Jets, who are very much not in the playoff race. How are you feeling about Kyren Williams this week?
I like Kyren Williams every week. Mostly it's because I roster him in leagues that matter to me. He did get, let's see, he got back on the touchdown wagon here over the last few weeks. He didn't get in last week, but he did have 108 yards rushing against San Francisco. And he's a good pass receiver, but his passing usage has been down. He only has, 3 games with 5 or more targets. And last year, I think he was a much bigger part of the receiving game. Part of that, I think, is that Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp both work that short area. That's their forte. So I like Kyren. They're giving Corum a few more carries to, I think, help keep Kyren fresh. But they're going to Kyren in their time of need.
Meanwhile, Breece Hall off the injury report, presumably back to full health. Are you feeling good about slotting him in your lineup this week?
I don't know, man. The Jets
suck.
He's
I did
so
not realize Aaron Rodgers is technically QB12 on the season.
The Jets have so much talent in Breece and Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Breece is RB29 since week 9. He's been battling injuries and stuff, missed some time. I think you probably, in redraft leagues, you probably have to start him based on where you drafted him. And hearing that he's healthy, you got to think, man, come on, Aaron, just throw him the ball a few times and quit checking out of running plays to pass plays and let Breece Hall cook. If I'm starting it, if I have him, I'm starting him, but I'm sweating out how it's going to come out.
Yep, I'm taking the Rams in this one.
I can't. The Jets are like the Browns. I can't bring myself to pick them.
One of the better games of the weekend, Philadelphia Eagles 12-2 at the 9-5 Washington Commanders. Dennis, when these two teams first linked up on a Thursday night game, Saquon Barkley simply exploded. He is still chasing history. Do you think that he has a good chance of getting there?
How close is he?
Let me look.
Let me see.
He didn't have a great game last week because they went and focused on the passing game.
So he's at 1,688 yards, and he needs 2,106.
Yep.
I don't think he gets there. That's about 400. It's over just about a little over 400 yards. Has he got 3 games or 2?
3.
No, he's got a shot. If he
needs to. I think he pretty much is where he needs to be closer to 150 a game, which is right about what he did when he was facing the Washington Commanders the last time.
But hell, Mike Evans has come back and he's got himself lined up for another 1,000-yard season with a couple more good games. So he's RB1 in points per game. He's RB1 overall. He's been successful. I think he's been everything that the Eagles wanted. They wanted him to take some of the pressure off of Jalen Hurts in the running game. And aside from the touchdown vulturing, he's really, I think, stepped up into that role. He's by all accounts, a great guy, a great teammate, a hard worker. I'd be happy to see him go get that record. Unfortunately, I don't roster him anywhere. So,
yeah, he had 146 and 2 touchdowns the last time he played the Commanders. I think it could be a good game. On the flip side, the best and most consistent receiver for the Commanders, really the only one I would consider outside of tight end Zach Ertz, is Terry McLaurin. Are you excited about him in this matchup?
Man, it seems like Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury have unlocked Terry McLaurin.
Thank God.
He's well, you want to hear something crazy? He's averaging the fewest targets of his career. But he's also averaging the second highest receptions of his career. He's got a career high 11 touchdowns.
A.J. Brown in Tennessee.
He's got a career high 11 touchdowns. His previous high was 7 touchdowns. His previous high finish, where is he at now? He's wide receiver 5. Previously, his best finish was a wide receiver 14. And I know you've looked. He most often he's in the low 20s and 30s, just because the talent hasn't translated to fantasy goodness like we would like. But no, I think I think you keep firing McLaurin up because him and Jaden Daniels got it going on.
I am taking the Commanders to pull the upset this week.
Yeah, good for you, man. I'm going Eagles.
Next up, the 7-7 Arizona Cardinals, who still have a faint pulse in the playoff race at the 3-11 Carolina Panthers. Dennis Trey McBride is having an amazing season: 116 targets, 89 receptions, 938 yards, 0 touchdowns. Do you think that might change this week?
So here's what I want from people. Yeah, Trey McBride has caught a lot of passes, gotten a lot of targets, and has not gotten in the end zone. But we got to stop acting like he's never scored a touchdown. He scored 4 touchdowns last year.
No, he scored 3 touchdowns last year, 1 in his rookie year. He's only got 4 total. He's not ever been a big touchdown guy.
Whatever. So 3 last year. He's a really good tight end. Maybe he doesn't get a touchdown this year, but also he's got Kyler Murray as his quarterback. James Conner has had quite the resurgence, and so they're letting him run the ball in close. Kyler will vulture touchdowns from the 35-yard line, whatnot. I think he scores before the season's over, but let's not pretend he's never scored. The narrative just feels to me like everyone's like, oh, he's never scored. Is it like touchdown Tommy Vardell when he came out of Stanford? There's a little bit of that. It does feel a little bit. Vardell didn't score near as many touchdowns in the pros as he did in college.
Meanwhile, for Carolina, Xavier Legette is out. We've seen Adam Thielen pick up since he came back. Are you feeling him for the fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, I like Thielen is wide receiver 19 since he came back in week 12. He provides, I think, that kind of stability that Bryce Young needs with the young team and growing the ground game with Hubbard, the reliability of Adam Thielen. That allows for David Moore and Jalen Coker, and I know Legette is out this week, but them to kind of grow in their roles while Thielen is productive.
I am taking the Cardinals.
I'm taking the Panthers for the home upset.
I did that last week. It was not a fun ride. The 12-2 Minnesota Vikings at the 8-6 Seattle Seahawks, who are trying to fight on for their playoff lives. Dennis, Sam Darnold just keeps rolling along. You feeling good about him as a starter this week for fantasy playoffs?
He's QB8 on the year. He's got Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones. He's got all the tools to keep making himself look good. Sammy is making himself some 2025 money. That's what Sam Darnold is doing. He might be the new Geno Smith.
Speaking of Geno Smith, he came out with an injury last week, but he is off the injury report too, much like Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. They want to will themselves to believe that he is fine. Do you expect a decent game?
Yeah. Geno's QB 14, but he's only QB 23 since week 8. So he has faded. He doesn't seem to have the same kind of connection with DK Metcalf as he has had in previous years, though this seems to be a good matchup for DK. So we could see something happen there. I'm nervous starting Geno. He's a low-end QB2, I think, at best. But, at least he's not Mason Rudolph.
I'm into that. I am taking the Vikings.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 3-11 New England Patriots at the 11-3 Buffalo Bills. Dennis, how you feeling about Ramondre Stevenson?
Oh, I wish I felt better. It's hard to trust him. He's a pretty talented player. Drake May looks like he's going to be the real deal. Is he going to be Josh Allen? Probably not, but I think he has the potential to be, a top 12 quarterback. They need wide receiver development in the worst way. They need offensive line improvement. Kraft has come out and said he doesn't plan to move on from Jared Mayo. So it'll be interesting to see how the offseason goes and what kind of moves they make, what their draft looks like. You probably have to start Stevenson if you roster him, but you're doing it and taking a little bit of antacid along for that ride.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I have him in a league, and I actually am playing Aaron Jones and Rico Dowdle over him. So, I mean, I think it really depends on your.
So, would you play Kendre Miller over him?
No.
I heard a lot of Kendre Miller talk this morning on Sirius XM. There were a lot of people talking about, they expect with Kamara dinged up, they expect the Saints to help protect Rattler by just running the shit out of Kendre Miller.
But they don't have a good enough offense, and it's a horrendous matchup. The Saints are one team where with Kamara out, there are 0 Saints that I feel comfortable playing in a playoff matchup. If you're playing one, I'll pray for you because they're playing Green Bay. We'll get to that. That's not a good looking game. Meanwhile, for the Bills, I think I still feel comfortable enough that I would take a shot on Shakir, but how are you feeling about these Bills pass catchers? I'm going to include tight ends as well for fantasy playoffs.
It's like playing whack-a-mole right now outside of Khalil Shakir, because just when you think the funnel starts to narrow, Dawson Knox or Curtis Samuel catches a touchdown pass and 3 or 4 passes for okay yardage. I'm not trusting Keon Coleman. He's literally a please. I don't have any upside position on my bench other than Keon Coleman. So hopefully he can catch a 30-yard touchdown pass and get me 9 points. Cooper, it seemed like it early on it was going to gel. It just hasn't yet.
Yeah, I pulled him out and put in Romeo Dubs in one league. I actually think it's our Roundtable Dynasty League. I was looking at Cooper. I'm like, I can't do it.
I don't blame you. I don't hate that. I mean, the Packers like Dobbs. They at least throw the ball to him.
My only concern with the Packers is everything, but I'm taking the Bills in that one.
Yeah, me too.
Worst matchup on the schedule by far is the 3-11 Jacksonville Jaguars, a mash unit, at the 2-12 Las Vegas Raiders, another mash unit. Brenton Strange, 12 targets, caught 11 passes for 73 last week. Are you firing him up this week in tight end?
So he's tight end 30 on the year, but he was tight end 2 last week. He's had early in the season when Ingram missed time, he had a couple, 8-9 point games. Other than this week, he hasn't really went off. He was tight end 9 weeks 2 through 6 when Ingram was out. But he's got only 5 games over 9 points. Maybe given his playing time, that's a good number. I like Strange's talent. He's not a receiver like athlete in the way that Ingram is, but he's more of a Pat Fryermuth kind of guy, which is weird since they both went to Penn State. That's who came to mind. Maybe a Hunter Henry type of tight end, can make some plays in the field and still a good blocker. For me, I think that a lot of where I am with Strange is more about dynasty and wanting to see what they do with Evan Ingram, because it feels like Strange is going to slide into the starting role when they're done with Ingram. Is not sure when that is yet.
Yeah, I do like the long-term upside, but I actually like him this week. I think he's a good fit with Mac Jones and the fact that they also have no receivers. I actually put him just inside my top 12. I made him a start, my sit-start call. For the Raiders, Sincere McCormick went to IR. His season is over. Madison is there. Amir Abdullah is there. Is there a Raiders running back you would actually chance playing in the playoffs?
Probably not. Amir Abdullah is a deep flex just because he has the potential to catch a few passes. Aiden O'Connell, it looks like he's going to be playing. So that's an upgrade, right? But, they're going to throw the ball to Myers. They're going to throw the ball to Brock Bowers. Madison will probably lead them in carries. And I think that Abdullah gets a little bit of play in the run game, but I don't think either one gets enough to warrant playing.
I am actually taking the Jaguars in this one.
I'm going to take the Raiders at home. I know Max Crosby's out, but Robert Spillane.
Neither of those teams are very good, so nothing would surprise me. A matchup that they probably thought was going to be great a few weeks ago that just isn't is the San Francisco 49ers at 6-8 at the 6-8 Miami Dolphins. Only one of these teams really has a pulse in the playoff race, and it's not the one you would expect. We mentioned Isaac Guerendo has been officially ruled out. Does that make you more interested in playing Deebo Samuel? A lot of talk about him being part of their answer at the running game.
Well, they have used Deebo in the running game pretty much his entire career. We may see his high carries in any game this week against the Dolphins. Deebo's had an off year. It just hasn't been – the team hasn't been great this year. With McCaffrey out, there was nobody there that really could pick them up and put them on their back. Bosa was injured a lot, and so the defense wasn't able to kind of, do its thing normally. Dre Greenlaw took, 9 weeks, 10, 12 weeks to get back from his injury last year. I think this may be a good week to play Deebo because there have been a lot of weeks that it hasn't been a good week. But I could see Deebo getting 10 carries this week and maybe 4 targets.
Yeah, he needs to pick up his play. We shall see. For Miami, Jalen Waddle now downgraded to doubtful. Probably won't be out there. Tyreek Hill, questionable, hasn't been able to practice much. How are you feeling about him?
If he plays, I'm playing him. You can't leave him on your bench even in the fantasy playoffs if he plays. But the guy I really want on this offense right now, I think, is Jonnu Smith.
Yep,
because I think he gives
95 targets for Jonnu Smith this week, and then 85 targets for Devon Achane.
Right. Achane. You're starting Achane if you roster him. I think Jonnu Smith is in for a tight end 1 week with Waddle out. But I think Hill will get, if he plays, he's going to get his regular complement of targets. So, you start him. He's wide receiver 16 on the year. Waddle is wide receiver 40. So even if Waddle was playing, I think you could make a case for sitting him if you had better options.
I'm taking the Dolphins in this one.
Yeah, me too.
Makes me
I
nervous as
mean,
a Broncos fan. I took all three of the teams that are chasing them in the playoffs to win.
well, the Niners have a losing record, so that bodes well for the Dolphins.
They also have a losing record. Sunday Night Football. Speaking of losing records, the 6-8 Dallas Cowboys, who can't buy a win at home, are hosting the 8-6 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucky Irving, after a couple of weeks being dinged up, is off the injury report. How are you feeling about him and Rashad White?
I think we'll see what they want as their traditional split. We're going to see probably 14 to 16 carries for Bucky and 3 targets, and we'll see about 9 targets for Rashad White, and about 4 or 5 carries. And then they'll put Sean Tucker in for 3 plays. Irving's RB21, White's RB19. I think you fire both of them up in that range.
If they get up big, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little more Tucker. And given the way Cowboys have played, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Speaking of the Cowboys, Jake Ferguson was a darling in 2023. We have not seen the same, especially with the weird offense that they're playing. He hasn't had double-digit fantasy points since week 9. Are you taking a chance on him in the fantasy playoffs?
Probably not. He's one of those hope guys. If you play him, it's because you're hoping something happens. But he missed 3 games, subpar quarterback play, force feeding CD Lamb, and Rico Dowdle has become the second coming of Tony Dorsett. Ferguson is going to get some targets, may or may not do something with them. They tend to throw the ball in the end zone to one of their 17 no-name wide receivers. It'll be the CD Lamb, Rico Dowdle show.
I was just looking. So he hasn't had a double-digit point game since they lost Dak. I think they had a good connection. I don't know if he has much of a connection, or I don't know if anyone has much of a connection outside of Lamb with Cup or with Rush. I am taking the Buccaneers in this one.
So am I.
The 5-9 dumpster fire, known as the New Orleans Saints, heading into Green Bay to play the 10-4 Green Bay Packers Monday Night Football. I'm sure ESPN is just pumped about that. As you mentioned, no Alvin Kamara this week, maybe not for the rest of the season. How does that make you feel about Kendre Miller?
Well, my initial reaction was not much in redraft, but the more I've listened to some of the other analysts, the guys on Sirius, they feel like Miller is going to get opportunity. And that's the one thing that we're always trying to chase, because if you're not getting opportunity, you're not going to score points. So I don't think, he's going to get the lion's share of the running back opportunities. I don't know how many that's going to be. It could be, 10 touches total. And Spencer Rattler chucking it up 45 times, trying to keep up with the Packers.
I had Miller, I adjusted my rankings after pulling Kamara out. I have Miller at 31, kind of in the RB3 range, in the range of players like Jaylen Warren, Tank Bigsby, Jerome Ford, Travis Etienne, and Ramondre. I mean, I don't think it's terrible. He's had double-digit carries, I think, the last 2 games, even with Kamara in there, and he got a touchdown in one of them. I just don't – I saw a couple of people saying, he's going to go off. He's a one-for-one replacement for Kamara. I don't think he is, and I don't think their team is good enough. If Derek Carr was playing, I might like Ramondre Miller or Kendre Miller better, but Rattler and Haener have been so bad.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that in Dynasty, I might roll the dice and go out and try to acquire him before the game this weekend, because if he does have a good game, then you're probably going to have to pay a 3rd-round pick. If you get him now, maybe you get him for a 4th, or hell, maybe even a 5th, because somebody just wants to dump him.
Well, and what's curious to me, they obviously extended Kamara, but now we know there are going to be some wholesale changes to their team. Is Carr back? What does the offense look like? Um, lot of questions, but I do think Miller is worth a long-term stash. Dennis, probably the eternal question for the Green Bay Packers, but really important in a fantasy playoff week. What are you doing with Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and Christian Watson?
So Reed, by the numbers, seems to be the guy you want to start. He's wide receiver 20 on the year. But I think he's a little more volatile than that number would dictate. I think Dobbs is the possession guy on this team. I think he thinks he's more than that, but really he's a good receiver. Christian Watson is the big play guy, the alpha DK Metcalf-ish, 50-50 ball down the field guy. I'm probably more comfortable starting Dobbs, even though he's only wide receiver 54. I know he's missed some time.
He made a couple of incredible touchdown grabs last week.
Yeah, he's a good player. I like Reed. I'd be happy if I was able to flex either one of them. I'd be sweating it a little bit if I was having to push one of them in my RB3, or excuse me, my wide receiver 3. I'd really be sweating it if I was having to play one as my wide receiver 2.
That's kind of where I am. Reed and Doubs, are probably flex considerations for me. I feel like Watson is like the YOLO flex. If you had a bad Thursday and a bad Saturday games, and it's like my chances of winning aren't that great, because Watson feels like the guy that gives you 40 points or 4 points and nowhere in between.
We should in the next league that I start, I might include that. That's you've got a YOLO flex. You got to play a YOLO player there.
My other concern about the Packers, which is a concern too if you roster Jacobs, is I don't think the Saints are good, and if they get up, are they
Jacobs gonna eat?
Or are they going to give him some rest and let some of the other guys go grind it out because they don't need him to win? And they're kind of in a no man land dead zone in terms of improving their seed. They seem pretty locked into the 6th seed. I don't think anyone can catch them, and I don't think they can catch anyone. So,
yeah.
But I am taking the Packers in this one.
So am I.
That'll do it for this week's schedule. Big games going on. We will be back maybe with a tip of the Santa cap on Tuesday to do some recaps and to get you ready for the Christmas Day games and everything else that's going on. But Dennis, if people have some traveling time, some time on planes, some time in cars, what can they do to fill that time?
So we've got the perfect planes, trains, and automobiles distraction for you. Go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, download 60, 70 episodes. We've got hundreds of them out there. We'll keep your ears full of fun and football for the entire holiday season.
Apparently you're planning on some of these people flying to Latvia. But that'll do it for us today. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the weekend, and we will look forward to seeing you on Christmas Eve as we dive into the week and get everything all set. Have a wonderful weekend.